ended. We know Paine's exigence. The video kind of makes that clear. He's pushed to write because of what he sees working in America, or what he imagines working in America because of how the system is set up, versus what he's seeing in Britain. Who would you say his audience is?
The people.
What people? Citizens of? Which country? Okay, so we can say Americans. Can we be more specific?
He's trying to speak like he heard.
Well, we know that. But in terms of audience, can we be more specific about who he's trying to speak to besides just a blanket American? Huh? So likely he is talking to those because remember, this is a country of immigrants. He's obviously not writing this towards Native Americans. So when I think we have to be a little more specific to look for. He is probably addressing those that are hesitant about independence and breaking away. He wants to make clear why staying with King George and England is the wrong choice here. And so I think we also can balance this out that the audience is likely wider than just Americans. He is looking here, think about the title of the article. He named the pamphlet Common Sense. And of course, you have probably heard this phrase before, that if it was so common, we wouldn't need to call it common sense. Seemingly should be. We assume everybody has it, but not necessarily. He's trying to say that the ideas within should be apparent and obvious to all. So, yeah, he's trying to hit Americans, but could you see where maybe he's talking to British people that don't recognize how limited their own structure is? Think about what's happening at roughly the same time as the American Revolution. The French are going crazy over there too. So likely he's also talking there. This has a wider audience that we can appeal to. But we want to look at the fact that he's trying to talk to Americans that are hesitant about independence. As we get into purpose, I want to start to frame the conversation into some of the bigger ideas that he's expressing and how he's doing so. So let's talk a bit with his opener. He's really specific about showing the difference between government and society. How would you describe what he has to say about those two ideas? Or use quotes of how he says it. Government bad.
Society is a blessing.
He says society is a blessing. What does he call government?
Evil.
Necessary.
A necessary evil. So notice from the start, if we're looking at rhetorical strategies that he's employing, these are clear examples of diction choices, because you kind of got to the summary of like, hey, government's bad. You got there because you saw him describe it as evil. That gives us a very clear definition. He's painting with, white and black here in terms of how he's viewing them. Diction goes hand in hand in helping to develop the tone. If you had to describe Paine's tone throughout what we read, how would you describe it? What are words that you think are appropriate? They don't have to be perfect. What? There definitely is a passion to what he is saying here. And so anger can show that passion. Anybody come away with a different impression?
It's straightforward.
Straightforward. It's okay. We got something to start. What else does he talk about with these two ideas that stood out to you of the difference between government and society? So which comes first, according to Payne? Society. Why?
Because there's probably a social class that they have to people.
Maybe if we said there's a want for socialization, I think that's a little better, because when you bring in social class, we want to see that as leveling. Seemingly, I'm better than you because, and instead he kind of brings it to society exists because people want that interaction.
Like saying that there can be a government without a society.
Yeah, he's pretty clear that society comes first and government only comes because of that. Why does government eventually develop? Why is it a necessary evil?
He says that I am by reflecting God will furnish the means by which we suffer.
Can you say it a little louder?
He said, our community is heightened by reflecting that we furnish the means by which we suffer.
We furnish the means by which we suffer. In other words, we create this system of government, and government punishes us in his mind. Why do we create this ideal of government? Why does something that starts as a blessing become something that is a necessary evil in his mind? Say it a little louder. They fall for the wrong people. Okay. So that comes more once we have the government together, right? How do we make this jump? Why do we create government to begin with? Before we even talk about the people part.
People's wants and needs.
Okay. What about their wants and needs?
So that he says like the bigger they have of a society, the more the people's wants and needs start to change.
Yeah.
Too much power.
Too much power eventually comes into it once we establish this thing. But ultimately, what he gets to, if you go back towards the beginning of it, and he hits it again in his sort of situational explanation, he talks about the fact that government comes about because people can't, we have to regulate. He said if people could just act morally, we wouldn't have an issue. Is this ringing a bell for you? Or are you going, okay, yeah, I remember that? Yes, maybe, possibly. Let's talk for a moment about this word. Anybody have a quick and dirty definition of what we mean when we say that something is moral? That we possess morals, or we talk about a sense of morality?
You know,
Like the principles you gotta follow. Like
like knowing right from wrong.
Right from wrong, principles to follow.
Just doing the right thing.
Doing
It
the,
depends on everyone, because everyone is different.
what do you mean by that?
Like everyone has different ideologies, so morals vary per person.
Yes. Notice that good and evil are conditional phrases. They are not the same for everyone. Especially it gets really hinky when we include morality, because morality is informed not just by your society, but also by your religion. What you believe to be right or wrong comes from your own spiritual side as well. No one has the same. So when he makes a statement like, if everybody could just act right, like we wouldn't have this problem. Everyone has a different idea of how to act right. And so you notice that he says everything starts with people wanting to be together in community. But as problems come up because of how people act, we begin to regulate those things. And in essence, we form a government that becomes a necessary evil. Because we have to form this government to regulate behavior, we have issues that come about. We trust the wrong people sometimes. People don't always put the needs of the many in front of the needs of the few. He looks at some of these problems that come up naturally, and they're there. Can you tell me a situation that you have run across either here at school or just in your own sort of situation that you can get, that you're going, okay, that's sort of a rule that might have started out well intentioned, but oh man, it's just too much now. Now, this isn't going to draw in morality here. I'm going to keep this kind of a little bit more, but I understand the landmine that I'm stepping on. So if you're looking at me in a second when I bring it up and you're like, oh, get out of my way, I'm going to talk. I know. Dress code. So if we think about dress code rules, right? The best way I think we can start the conversation to talk about dress code rules, if we follow Payne's line of reasoning here in his writing, is to think about what you sleep in. How to go to bed. How are you comfortable when you go to bed? What do you dress? That is probably one of the only places that there is not a dress code. If we didn't have a dress code here at school, I know this is a huge logical leap, so just go with me. It's okay. I know. If we didn't have a dress code, it's no different than going to bed. You could have people that show up naked because they're like, this is what I'm comfortable in. Maybe they choose to only wear socks because they're like, you know what? My feet get cold. We need something that at least regulates to some degree, hey, there are certain expectations here. But how has this system of dress code kind of become, like Payne says, government did? Tell me some of the issues that you notice with dress code rules that kind of follow the same logic that Payne does to get to his issues with government.
Like they make promises but not follow it.
What promises do they make with dress code that they don't follow?
Something like, for example, like dress code was given students, like the students given dress code, like what to wear to school, like what not to wear. Like students do not follow such rules.
Yeah.
Something like the way the government promises to do some stuff, but they cannot do anything out.
So your example hinges on the fact that even though there are rules to dress code, if they're not strictly enforced, it's similar to how government can make a promise to people but never follow through. Okay, so let's start there. Can a dress code rule be fairly enforced across the board? I think within limits. Don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously we can enforce the dress code too. Do you have clothes on your back? But think about some of the small things that you know that maybe you've gotten away with or only certain principals pay attention to. There are issues that make dress code rules inherently unfair. Think about how broad dress code rules have become. If it was simply wear something, okay. But do you think it's fair that it's like, hey, I see a dime-sized hole above your knee. Come with me, you're gonna miss class. You don't get to learn today. Think about the fact that if you worked online, anybody checking your dress code at home? Nope, you can do whatever you want. But here, totally different set of rules. Notice how, and I'm using this as an example, what might start here with we love to come together and we need a simple ground rule has become this overly large, complicated set of rules governing what you can and can't wear that isn't always enforceable or fair to all, that seems to only be run by certain people that want to enforce it. and that ultimately penalize you even though you have very little voice in how the rules get made. Are you now kind of going, okay, now I see what he's doing. I got you. When we see what Payne wants us to understand, this can be rolled into what we noticed with yesterday's prompt and his view of America. Now, do not look at yesterday's timed writing prompt and assume that just because they're asking you about views of America, and here's somebody that's talking about how America has this promise, that they want you to come in and go, yeah, America, we're awesome. They want you to have your own viewpoint and opinion, because if you look at some of the things that were in yesterday's prompt, did you agree with everything that Payne said?
No.
No. Think about the inherent issue that's present when Payne is writing it. He says that everybody in America has a voice. Who doesn't?
Like everyone under 18.
And everybody under 18. Who else?
Lower class people.
Lower class people. Who else?
Some races.
Every other race except for white people? Let's be honest and fair and put it out there, because I know you're going like, I guess, yeah. It's easy to view it and to think in practice, in ideal, in how it's set up. This system seems to be like perfectly attuned, but we know that there are issues that are still problematic today in some of those words. And so as we're looking to expand to, hey, where are we going with this tomorrow? We wanted to get some background to see, hey, how does Payne think and write? Because it might help us to understand that little bit that we have there. Because what we're going to do is really get you to engage a bit, to go, what are some of the things that you notice about the view of America today, that contemporary idea? And we're going to expand this into some research. Having an opinion is great, but we want to be able to put it to words. What are tangible examples that we can find that you could use? So tomorrow we're going to introduce how to use databases through the library, how to cite sources in MLA format. And we're going to collect a few sources this week. We're not going to do a huge full-blown research paper. Nah, we're going to collect like 2 or 3 sources. We're going to work on simple citations in the essay that we produce, really basic things. So we're going to step into research with small steps. If you liked what you saw today and you're like, ooh, this is kind of cool, on the Canvas page today, I shared a video from Yale University. They recorded, probably at this point, it would have been like 8 or 10 years ago. They partnered with a couple of professors at Yale, Ivy League, super expensive school, and filmed their entire semester worth of classes. So you could take this lady whose video is there today, you could watch every one of her lectures from her entire course, end to end. So the video that's on there starts when she starts talking about Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and she's talking about the rhetoric of it. How is he addressing the audience? How is he making his message really good? So it gives you that impression of, how is a college class going to deal with this subject? What's it look like? And there are tons of these courses that are available. If you have any passing interest, take a look online. There's a lot of stuff that's there. So we're going to end there.
Do we do this? I got Canvas.
You do not need to worry about doing it.